There's a truth you've been dodging your whole life. You walk among broken mirrors, blindfolded by inherited hope, numbed by promises that never came true. You were taught to believe the world is fair, that morality shapes destiny, that the good will always be rewarded. They lied to you. History isn't written by the virtuous. It's carved in stone by the bold. Those who understand the world doesn't bow to innocence. Inside you, there's a chained sovereign, suffocated by an idealism that's been draining your soul. A sleeping ruler who, in the name of an imposed purity, surrendered his inner strength. Today, those chains will be challenged. Will you dare to stare straight into the naked anatomy of power, without the fairy tales you were sold, without the comforting myths about good men ruling just lands? 500 years ago, a man was burned in the fire of misunderstanding for revealing this forbidden truth. They called him demon, monster, cynic. But what if Niccolò Machiavelli had only pulled away the last veil? What if his work was never a handbook for tyrants, but a relentless mirror of what we are, and have always been? You're about to step through a door that never closes. What follows isn't comfort. It isn't redemption. It's a fracture. The unsettling revelation that, in the arena of existence, it's not the purest who prevail, but the most awake. Prepare yourself, not to learn about Machiavelli, but to find Machiavelli within you. The shadow you've always feared to face. The part of you that's always known. The world doesn't move to the rhythm of virtue. It moves under the invisible hand of those who dare to see reality as it is, and act. You want to be loved. You want to be accepted. You want to be seen as good, fair, and righteous. From your first cry, you were taught to chase the smile of others, to beg for approval like a thirsty traveler in a desert of glances. Inside you, there's an exiled sovereign whose scepter was replaced by invisible chains forged from the fear of rejection. You were raised to distrust power, to believe that wanting influence was corruption, to think that leading was arrogance. And so, prisoner of imposed virtues, you've watched the bold take what you only dared to dream about. You comforted yourself by saying it's better to be moral than effective, pure rather than victorious. Yet in the stillness of sleepless nights, you've known the truth. No one ever built an empire with good intentions alone, and no destiny was forged through empty speeches. There's a silent war unfolding every single day, and whether you like it or not, you are in it. In this war, ignorance is defeat, and illusion is suicide. The eyes you've averted, the opportunities you've ignored, the truths you refuse to see, they built the cell you now inhabit. But there's still a crack in the wall, a faint opening to reclaim what is your natural right, lucidity, the courage to see and to act. It will not be easy. There will be no applause. Perhaps more stones than flowers will be thrown your way. But as long as you deny your hunger for influence, others will drink from the river of reality in your place. And you? Will you stay chained to a morality that isn't yours, serving a theatre that mocks those who dare to be the protagonists? The moment is now, to awaken or to drift further, a puppet in a game you never chose, yet one that still shapes your fate. Picture a man who dared to strip the skin from society's hypocrisy, revealing the raw flesh of the human condition. A man who stared into the abyss of the collective soul and instead of recoiling in horror, described it with surgical precision. Niccolò Machiavelli was no armchair theorist. He was a combatant who felt the viscous pulse of power running through his hands. In the Florence of intrigues, exiles, and hidden daggers, he saw what few admit. Power is not virtue. It is necessity. While moralists preached about what rulers should be, Machiavelli wrote about what they must be to survive. He understood that the destiny of nations is rarely forged by saints, but by those who master time, chance, and the volatile nature of men. In his masterpiece, The Prince, he doesn't construct castles of idealism. He builds fortresses of brutal pragmatism. For him, Virtù was not moral goodness, but the raw ability to act when fortune, that blind goddess dancing on uncertainty, offers her rare benevolence. Virtù is adaptation, audacity, and cold calculation in the face of chaos. Fortune is the storm that topples empires. Virtù is the steady hand at the helm while others leap overboard. He saw that ruling often means choosing the lesser of two evils, that sometimes you must soil your hands to save the work, like a ruthless surgeon who wounds to heal. He knew inflexible purity is the enemy of survival. His lesson was never a call for gratuitous cruelty, but for the precision of a scalpel, to apply force only when necessary, and to stop the moment it ceases to be. The uncomfortable truth he revealed is this: ruling well is not always ruling gently. To lead is not to please, but to preserve, protect, and endure. And for the eyes of the people, the image of virtue often matters more than virtue itself. In Machiavelli's world, leadership is a constant battle between the desirable and the necessary, the expected and the effective, the comfort of hope and the weight of reality. This is his legacy, the invisible dagger you carry, whether you know it or not. The subtlest trap isn't an external betrayal, it's the belief you carry within. That inherited idea that the world runs on fair rules, that the virtuous win because of their virtue, that evil eventually collapses on its own. That is the most dangerous fable we were ever told. Machiavelli, like a heretic with open eyes, tore through that illusion. He showed that power does not honor goodness, it does not reward pure intentions, and it never bows to ideals. The political arena, and the inner arena of the self, obeys another law entirely, the law of brutal effectiveness. Those who act as if the world is what it should be, rather than what it is, are doomed to become sacrificial pieces on a board whose rules they never wrote. The illusion of absolute morality is the golden cage where a sovereign becomes a servant. How many times in your life have you avoided a difficult decision, waiting for the right thing to prevail on its own? How many times have you been betrayed, sidelined, or forgotten while holding on to codes that protected your image more than your results? Machiavelli does not ask you to abandon your principles. He demands that you recognize the distance between what is morally desirable and what is politically viable. A leader who refuses to step outside tradition when the moment demands it doesn't just doom himself, he drags everyone who trusted him into the fall. The real self-deception is believing it's nobler to fail in purity than to succeed in wisdom. It's wearing the armor of innocence, while others reshape reality in the shadows. You've been taught to feel guilty for wanting influence, for using strategy, for adjusting your moral compass in the chaos. Yet while you hesitate, others act. While you wrestle with how you wish things were, they sculpt what is. This is not about betraying your essence. It's about choosing. Will you cling to a fragile altar of purity, or walk with the lucid awareness of one who accepts the responsibility of living awake? True corruption is not using cunning when necessary. It's closing your eyes and surrendering your agency. That illusion has turned kings into slaves, leaders into forgotten footnotes. And now the question stands before you. Will you keep the broken armor, or will you step naked into the real storm of existence? There is a silent, almost invisible moment when virtue becomes contaminated. When goodness, clung to with blind insistence, transforms into harm. When purity, defended to the point of fanaticism, turns into poison. And you, believing you fight for light, awaken to find yourself sowing darkness. Machiavelli didn't just suspect this truth, he named it. Every form of power, he said without ornament, must balance between what seems good and what is necessary to survive. The one who chooses to be only loved is doomed to be devoured. The one who refuses to face the raw nature of circumstances hands himself over to the designs of others. Those who wave the banner of absolute morality are, ironically, the easiest prey for manipulation, because the person who refuses to see reality as it is becomes a toy in the hands of those who do. Think about the history of nations. How many promises of awakening, liberation, and truth have ended in oppression? How many leaders hailed as saviors have built prisons in the name of the good? When you believe your good is absolute, every means becomes justified, and thus the righteous turns executioner, the pure becomes oppressor, and the innocent hides fangs behind honeyed words. Machiavelli's brutal lesson is this: without lucid awareness of necessity, goodness rots. Blind virtue breeds monsters. Well-meaning unconsciousness paves the road to the very suffering we claim to despise. So ask yourself, are your ideals truly making you stronger, Or have they shackled you to an ego dressed in holy robes? Has your love for truth become a shield to protect you from truths you cannot bear to face? In the shadowed theatre of existence, the line between hero and tyrant is thinner than you dare admit. And sometimes, it is precisely in the stubborn defense of the good that we give birth to the evil we vowed to destroy. The time has come for the veil to fall. Seeing without illusion is not surrendering to cynicism. It is not the death of hope. It is the rebirth of a hope tempered by fire, a hope forged in the iron of truth, rather than inflated by the air of comforting lies. To see without illusion is to accept that human nature is ambiguous, that virtue is not constant, and that power will never halt in respect for pure intentions. It is to understand that you can be ethical and still be strategic, that you can be just without being naive. The cold gaze is not empty. It is weighty, deliberate, precise. It knows when to act with tenderness and when to wield necessary severity. It can look directly into the shadow without becoming it. To cultivate this gaze, you must let go of the need to be seen as good. You must release the unconscious craving for universal approval and awaken to the truth that not everyone will understand your path. You act not to please, but to build, not for applause, but to lay foundations that endure the storms of life. Ask yourself, before every decision, does this strengthen what is essential, or does it merely satisfy my ego's hunger to appear virtuous? Am I sowing reality or decorating illusion? This cold gaze demands courage. Courage to see others as they are. Courage to see yourself without the mask of self-image. Courage to accept that sometimes you will be the villain in someone else's story. It requires embracing the solitude that comes with clarity, for awakening often means walking alone. Machiavelli's unspoken gift is this: it's not enough to want the good. You must understand the terrain, the shifting currents of fortune, and the hidden forces shaping life beyond your awareness. The cold gaze is immune to sweet words, unmoved by veiled threats. It holds the helm with steady hands while the winds of chaos scream. This is the gaze you must forge now. To see without ornament, to act without waiting for permission, to live without apologizing for your strength. Because in the end, only those who see the world as it truly is can ever transform it. You stand at a crossroads only you can choose. To step through the mirror and accept your shadow as an essential part of your being, or to remain chained to the illusion of a purity that never existed. You can keep feeding the story that it's better to be good than to be strong. You can keep waiting for the world to spontaneously reward your virtue. Or you can rebel. You can decide to integrate both the light and the darkness within you, not as a betrayal of virtue, but as its fiercest protection, because only the one who has stared into the abyss can truly safeguard what is sacred. To accept your shadow is to become whole. It is to carry in your chest both compassion and ferocity, tenderness and determination, stillness and decisive power, without masks, without excuses, without fear. To embrace your shadow is to understand that true ethics does not deny reality. It walks through it with awakened consciousness, and deep down, you feel it now. Somewhere in the depths of your soul, you sense the pulse of a force that has been asleep too long. You feel the call to stop asking permission to exist, to rise as a complete human being, imperfect, flawed, yet authentic and free. This is not a journey of sainthood. It is a journey of integration. It is the kind of awakening that demands letting go of the false self you built to please others and reclaiming the power you once surrendered. Only through this integration can you build something that survives the tempests of life and the storms of fortune. It is not enough to understand. It is not enough to admire. You must act, and action begins now, within you, with the choice to let go of comforting illusions and embrace the uncomfortable truth of your inner freedom. Breathe, feel, stand tall, and choose. Will you accept your shadow, or will you keep living in the lie? The throne you have been seeking in distant horizons was never out there. It has always been here, concealed beneath layers of illusions, buried under the rubble of borrowed beliefs and inherited fears. It is not a throne forged in gold, polished by the applause of strangers, or guarded by the hollow crowns of public approval. It is a throne carved from the raw stone of truth, a seat built in the silence of your own awakening. in the courageous acceptance of both the light and the shadow that live within your soul. You are the last prince, not crowned by the hands of others, but self-anointed through the rare power to see clearly and act with precision. This coronation does not arrive with trumpets, banners, or the pageantry of the ego. It arrives in solitude, in the quiet moment when you finally stop negotiating with your own unconscious, stop bargaining with the shadows of your past suffering, and decide to take your rightful place within yourself. Stop waiting for the world to notice you. Stop begging for crumbs of validation from those who are too afraid to look into their own darkness. The world will not crown those who wait in silent humility, hoping that goodness alone will be enough. It will only recognize, and sometimes only fear, those who dare to rise from the ruins of their illusions, those who refuse to be ruled by dead hopes. The true prince does not dominate through brutality, nor does he hide behind the mask of perfect virtue. He walks the razor's edge between strength and compassion, between the necessity of action and the dignity of restraint. He carries in his veins the fierce realism of Machiavelli, the unflinching courage to face what is, and the disciplined power to shape what could be. He understands that power is not about conquest over others, but mastery over the self, mastery over the impulses that spring from ego, over the unconscious fears that seek to pull him back into the comfortable prison of mediocrity. You, with all your imperfections, your fears, your contradictions, are already the architect of your inner kingdom. Every decision you make, every silence you choose, every moment you stand your ground or walk away, they all lay bricks in the invisible fortress of yourself. And within that fortress, there are no spectators. There is no audience to applaud or condemn you. There is only the quiet authority of knowing you have taken responsibility for your own existence. No more excuses. No more pretending you don't know what needs to be done. You know, you have always known. The truth has been whispering to you in moments of solitude, in the long nights when your ego's defenses weakened and the voice of your soul broke through. You've seen glimpses of it in the suffering you've endured, in the traumas you've survived, in the meaning you've searched for in the darkness. And now, that truth demands not just to be seen, but to be lived. Fortune, blind, volatile, inexorable, will keep sending its storms. Sometimes it will strip away what you thought you needed. Other times, it will place opportunities in your path, wrapped in the camouflage of chaos. But in the end, it is your virtue, your cultivated strength, your sharpened clarity, that will steer the helm through these tempests. Without it, you are a passenger in your own life. With it, you are the captain, charting a course even when the map is incomplete. Machiavelli did not write for distant kings, for marble statues of power long dead. He wrote for the living, for the restless souls who still dare to think freely, for those who feel the ache of being more than they are allowed to be. He wrote for you who have felt the weight of your shadow and resisted the urge to bury it again. For you who have looked suffering in the eye and refused to let it turn you bitter. For you who understand that freedom is not handed out like a gift. It is seized, fiercely and consciously, by those willing to pay the price of letting go of their old selves. You are the last prince, not because of noble blood, but because of the nobility of lucidity. You have endured the darkness, navigated the unconscious, faced the tremors of the ego, and still chosen to rise. And that rise is not a moment. It is a lifelong act of power. And here is the final truth. The greatest power is not in ruling others. It is in never again being ruled by your own illusions. It is in living each day free from the invisible strings of expectation, from the shadows of who you were told to be. When you take that throne within yourself, the world outside may or may not change, but you will. And when you change, everything that matters will follow. So rise, not with the arrogance of one who thinks he has conquered the world, but with the quiet, unshakable presence of one who has conquered himself. The throne is already yours. The kingdom is already within you. And no force, not darkness, not suffering, not the shifting tides of fortune can take it away.